Some were too rare, some were too wild, and others were simply overshadowed. These 12 sports cars had the power, the style, and the speed, but history forgot them. Until now. Get ready to rediscover the lost legends of 1970s American performance. The 1971 AMC Javelin AMX 401 was one of the boldest statements ever made by American Motors Corporation, a company often seen as the underdog in the muscle car wars. AMC had always been the scrappy competitor, taking on the giants of the industry with fewer resources, but an abundance of innovation and determination. The Javelin AMX, particularly when equipped with the mighty 401 cubic inch V8, was proof that AMC could build a serious performance machine that could hold its own against the Ford Mustang, Boss 351, Chevrolet Camaro Z28, and even the Dodge Challenger RT. I took it to a stoplight drag race once, and no one expected an AMC to win. But when that 401 V8 roared, I left them all behind, recalled one proud owner. That was the essence of the Javelin AMX. It was a car that defied expectations. People often dismissed AMC as a company known for economy cars and quirky designs. But the Javelin AMX shattered those stereotypes with raw horsepower, aggressive styling, and legitimate racing pedigree. Under the hood, the Javelin AMX 401 packed AMC's largest and most powerful engine of the era. The 401 cubic inch, 6.6-liter V8 was officially rated at 330 horsepower and 430 lb-ft of torque, though many believe these numbers were underrated. In reality, the engine likely produced closer to 350-360 horsepower, making it a serious contender in the muscle car arena. The big block V8 had a deep, thunderous growl that made it clear this was no ordinary pony car. Coupled with a 4-speed manual transmission or an optional automatic, the Javelin AMX delivered strong acceleration, easily keeping pace with the best muscle cars of the early 1970s. But the Javelin AMX wasn't just about straight-line speed. Unlike some muscle cars that were built primarily for drag racing, AMC engineered the Javelin AMX with road racing in mind. The company had made a major push into Trans Am racing, enlisting the help of Roger Penske and Mark Donohue to develop the Javelin into a track-ready machine. The results spoke for themselves. AMC won the 1971 Trans Am Championship, beating the dominant Ford Mustang and Chevrolet Camaro teams. This racing success directly influenced the street version of the Javelin AMX, which featured improved handling, a well-balanced chassis, and a level of refinement that was often missing in other muscle cars of the era. The styling of the 1971 Javelin AMX was just as aggressive as its performance. This was the first year of the second-generation Javelin, and AMC had gone all in on bold, muscular design elements. The front end featured a long, sculpted hood with twin air vents, a deep-set grille, and a low-slung, menacing stance. The flared fenders gave the car an almost wide-body appearance, emphasizing its road-hugging stability. One of the most distinctive styling cues was the integrated rear spoiler, which was molded into the trunk lid rather than being a separate add-on like on many other muscle cars. This wasn't just for looks. The spoiler improved aerodynamics and high-speed stability, a lesson learned from the Trans Am racing program. AMC also offered the Go package for the Javelin AMX, which included a functional ram air hood scoop, heavy-duty suspension, power front disc brakes, and upgraded cooling systems to handle the demands of high-performance driving. This package made an already potent car even more capable, turning the Javelin AMX into a true street and track machine. Despite all of its strengths, the Javelin AMX 401 never achieved the same level of mainstream recognition as the Mustang, Camaro, or Challenger. AMC was always the underdog, and while their cars had the performance to compete, they didn't have the marketing budget or widespread dealership network to push sales numbers to the same heights as the Big Three. Additionally, the muscle car era was coming to an end by the early 1970s, with increasing insurance costs, rising fuel prices, and looming emissions regulations casting a shadow over high-performance cars. For those who have had the chance to own or drive one, The Javelin AMX remains an unforgettable experience. "It's the best-kept secret in muscle cars," said one collector. "It's got the power, the handling, and the looks, everything you want from a muscle car, but without the insane price tag of the more famous names." Today, the Javelin AMX 401 is finally getting the recognition it deserves, with collectors and enthusiasts seeking out these rare machines. In the world of classic American muscle, the 1971 AMC Javelin AMX 401 stands as a testament to what a determined underdog can achieve. It had the raw power to challenge the best, the handling to dominate the track, and the styling to turn heads wherever it went. Though it may have been overlooked in its day, it has since become one of the great unsung heroes of the golden era of muscle cars. By 1974, the golden age of muscle cars was coming to an end. Rising insurance costs, stricter emissions regulations, and the looming oil crisis had forced American automakers to rethink their approach to high-performance vehicles. Pontiac, once the undisputed leader of the muscle car movement, found itself at a crossroads. The legendary GTO, which had set the standard for performance in the 1960s, was no longer the tire-shredding beast it once was. The market was shifting, and Pontiac's response was to downsize the GTO, moving it onto the compact Ventura platform for the 1974 model year. For many enthusiasts, this was a betrayal. How could the mighty GTO, a name synonymous with raw power, be reduced to what was essentially a rebadged Nova? People laughed when I told them it was a GTO, until they heard the quadrajet howl, recalled one owner who had spent years defending his car from skeptics. True, the 1974 GTO didn't have the same street presence as the earlier models, but it wasn't without its merits. Under the hood, the standard 350 cubic inch Pontiac V8 produced 200 horsepower and 295 lb-feet of torque, respectable numbers given the era's restrictions. Buyers looking for a bit more excitement could opt for the dual exhaust version, which bumped output to 230 horsepower. While it was a far cry from the tire-smoking 400 and 455 cubic inch monsters of previous years, the 1974 GTO was still capable of holding its own in stoplight drag races. The lighter Ventura body actually gave it a handling advantage over some of the heavier intermediates of the time, making it a more balanced car than many gave it credit for. Performance aside, one of the biggest controversies surrounding the 1974 GTO was its styling. Gone were the muscular lines and aggressive stance of the late 60s models, replaced by the squared-off, colonnade-style body of the Ventura. The GTO package did include some unique styling cues, such as a revised grille, GTO badging, rally-to wheels, and a functional shaker hood scoop. But for die-hard fans, it wasn't enough. "It looks like a Ventura with some GTO stickers slapped on," was a common complaint. To make matters worse, the car was only available as a two-door coupe. There was no convertible, no hardtop, and no judge package. For purists, this was the final insult. Inside, the 1974 GTO was a mix of sporty intentions and cost-cutting reality. The bucket seats and optional rally gauge cluster gave it a driver-focused feel, but the materials left something to be desired. Hard plastics, faux wood grain, and basic trim levels reminded buyers that this was still a Ventura at heart. The good news was that the smaller platform made for a tighter, more agile driving experience compared to the bloated muscle cars of the early 70s. Pontiac engineers had tried to create a car that offered a balance between performance and affordability, but that compromise ultimately alienated both muscle car enthusiasts and economy-minded buyers. Despite its respectable performance, the 1974 GTO struggled in the marketplace. Sales were disappointing, with only 7,058 units sold, a far cry from the six-figure numbers the GTO had achieved in its prime. The move to the Ventura platform had failed to capture the imagination of buyers, and by the end of the model year, Pontiac made the difficult decision to discontinue the GTO nameplate entirely. It would be more than 3 decades before the GTO would return, and when it did, it would be in the form of an Australian-built Holden Monaro, further distancing it from its American muscle car roots. In hindsight, the 1974 GTO wasn't as bad as many made it out to be. True, it was a victim of its time, hampered by emissions regulations and corporate downsizing, but it still had the heart of a performance car. For those willing to tinker, the 350 V8 responded well to upgrades, and swapping in a larger Pontiac 400 or Fortune 55 was a relatively straightforward process. Some owners embraced the car's underdog status, modifying their GTOs into formidable sleepers that could embarrass more prestigious muscle cars on the street. Today, the 1974 GTO remains one of the most overlooked models in Pontiac's history. Its Ventura roots have kept collector interest relatively low, meaning that for those looking for an affordable entry into the world of classic muscle, it represents a hidden gem. While it may never achieve the legendary status of the 1965 or 1969 models, the 1974 GTO still holds an important place in the story of Pontiac performance. It was the last gasp of the original muscle car era, a reminder of a time when even in the face of adversity, Pontiac still tried to keep the spirit of the GTO alive. By the dawn of the 1970s, the idea of blending American muscle with European sports car aesthetics had already been experimented with. But few cars truly succeeded in merging the two philosophies seamlessly. The 1971 Tomaso Pantera was one of the most promising attempts, an Italian-designed mid-engine exotic with the heart of a Detroit muscle car. It had the makings of a perfect storm, stunning looks, Ford-backed reliability, and legitimate supercar performance. Yet, despite its potential, the Pantera never became the mainstream success it could have been. It remained a car for enthusiasts, one that was both thrilling and frustrating in equal measure. For American buyers, the Pantera was a tantalizing alternative to the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the era. It's Italian on the outside, but pure Detroit muscle under the hood. The best of both worlds, one owner recalled. That was the selling point, an exotic that didn't require a specialist mechanic or sky-high service costs. At a time when a Ferrari or Maserati was both temperamental and outrageously expensive to maintain, the Pantera offered an appealing alternative. A Ford V8 meant cheap and plentiful parts, making the dream of owning a high-performance European-style sports car far more accessible. Designed by Ghia's Tom Charda, the Pantera's styling was pure exotica. Its wedge-shaped body, low stance, and aggressive proportions were reminiscent of the most cutting-edge European sports cars of the time. It was sleek, purposeful, and turned heads everywhere it went. The design was a massive step forward from its predecessor, the De Tomaso Mangusta, which suffered from a cramped cabin and poor weight distribution. The Pantera's new monocoque chassis provided a more rigid structure, improving both handling and safety. This was no simple rework, it was a complete reinvention. Under the rear deck lid sat the 351 cubic inch Ford Cleveland V8, an engine better known for its use in Mustangs and Torinos than Italian sports cars. Producing 330 horsepower and 355 pound-feet of torque, it propelled the Pantera from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 5.5 seconds, an incredible figure for the time. A top speed of around 160 miles per hour put it in the same league as Ferrari's 365 GTB4 Daytona. The mid-engine layout provided excellent balance, and the ZF 5-speed transaxle, also used in the Ford GT40, ensured that all that power reached the rear wheels efficiently. But while the Pantera could run with the best, it had its share of shortcomings. The biggest issue was build quality. "I love it, but it's a nightmare sometimes," admitted an owner who had endured endless electrical gremlins and fit and finish problems. The Italian assembly process left much to be desired. Panel gaps were inconsistent. The interior materials felt cheap, and the car's infamous cooling issues plagued early models. Many owners found themselves stranded due to overheating, caused in part by the inadequate radiator and poor airflow design. Ford worked to address these problems, adding better cooling systems and improving reliability, but by then the Pantera's reputation as a finicky exotic had already taken root. Then there was the driving experience itself. The Pantera was fast, but it required skill to handle properly. The steering was unassisted and heavy at low speeds, requiring effort to maneuver. The ZF transaxle was robust, but had a stiff and mechanical feel, demanding precise shifts. The braking system, while adequate for the era, didn't inspire confidence under aggressive driving. And then there was the heat. The mid-engine layout generated serious cabin temperatures, making long drives uncomfortable. It was a car that required effort and patience, but for those who learned to tame it, the rewards were immense. Despite its flaws, the Pantera had some high-profile fans. None other than Elvis Presley owned one, and in a now-famous incident, he reportedly became so frustrated when his Pantera wouldn't start that he pulled out a handgun and shot it. If nothing else, it was a testament to the emotional reactions the car could provoke, both good and bad. Ford had high hopes for the Pantera, selling it through Lincoln Mercury dealerships as a more affordable alternative to European exotics. However, by 1975, Ford's enthusiasm for the project had waned. Stricter emissions and safety regulations, coupled with the looming oil crisis, made the Pantera increasingly difficult to sell. Ford cut ties with Tomaso, and while production continued in Italy, the car became more of a niche player than the volume success it was originally intended to be. Today, the Pantera remains a cult classic, appreciated for its raw power, striking design, and unique place in automotive history. It was a car ahead of its time, one that promised a future where American muscle and European sophistication could coexist in perfect harmony. While that vision was never fully realized, the Pantera stands as a bold. By the late 1970s, the American muscle car was on life support. The glory days of the late 60s, when street-legal machines packed with massive big-block V8s ruled the highways, had given way to an era of smog regulations, rising insurance costs, and increasing fuel economy concerns. Muscle cars were no longer the dominant force they had once been, and even Mopar, one of the most celebrated names in high-performance American cars, was feeling the pressure. But Dodge wasn't willing to give up just yet. Enter the 1978 Dodge Magnum XE GT, a car that represented Mopar's last attempt at blending muscle car performance with the luxury coupe, styling that had become popular in the mid to late 70s. It looks like a luxury car, but that 400 under the hood means business. It's a sleeper, said one longtime owner, echoing the sentiment of those who truly understood what the Magnum XE GT was all about. At a glance, it seemed more like a personal luxury coupe, a big, comfortable highway cruiser with a long hood and a fastback-style roofline. But there was more to this car than met the eye. Hidden beneath its sharp-edged styling was Dodge's final attempt at keeping muscle car performance alive before the malaise era fully took hold. The Dodge Magnum was born out of necessity. By 1978, the Charger, once one of the most feared muscle cars on the street, had evolved into something softer, larger, and more focused on comfort than raw performance. NASCAR regulations were also shifting, requiring manufacturers to produce street-legal versions of their race cars for homologation. Dodge saw an opportunity. Rather than continue watering down the Charger, they would introduce an entirely new model to replace it, something sleeker, more aerodynamic, and still capable of packing a punch. Thus, the Magnum was born, designed to be a high-speed grand tourer with the heart of a muscle car and the aerodynamic efficiency of a NASCAR stock car. One of the most striking features of the Magnum XE GT was its front-end design. Unlike the traditional upright grills of earlier Mopars, the Magnum had a futuristic, slanted nose with hidden headlights that retracted when not in use. This wasn't just for looks. Dodge engineers shaped the front end specifically to improve high-speed aerodynamics. The smooth, flowing lines of the car were designed to cut through the wind with as little resistance as possible, an important factor in NASCAR racing. The street version benefited from this design as well, making it one of the most aerodynamic production cars of its time. Under the hood, the Magnum XE GT came with several engine options, ranging from a mild 318 cubic inch small block V8 to the more powerful 360 and 400 big block V8s. But the real powerhouse was the optional 440 cubic inch V8, one of the last of its kind before Dodge was forced to retire it due to emissions regulations. While horsepower ratings had dropped significantly compared to the muscle car heyday, the 440 still had enough torque to remind drivers of what Mopar muscle was all about. A heavy-duty suspension package helped keep all that power under control, while the standard TorqueFlite automatic transmission ensured smooth and consistent acceleration. The Magnum XE GT wasn't just about performance. It was also a luxury coupe in the grandest 1970s tradition. The interior was plush with deep bucket seats, thick carpeting, and a futuristic dashboard filled with gauges and controls. Dodge offered a host of high-end options, including power windows, air conditioning, and even a sunroof. One of the most popular features was the optional T-top roof, which allowed drivers to remove the roof panels for an open-air driving experience. Despite its blend of performance, luxury, and NASCAR heritage, the Magnum struggled to find an audience. The late 1970s were a difficult time for high-performance cars, as fuel shortages and rising insurance rates made big V8 coupes less attractive to buyers. Mopar fans, who had once embraced the Charger and Challenger, were lukewarm about the Magnum. It was too big to be a true muscle car, yet too aggressive to fully fit in with the growing trend of personal luxury coupes like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo or Ford Thunderbird. Dodge attempted to boost the Magnum's performance image by entering it in NASCAR, with legendary driver Richard Petty behind the wheel. While the Magnum showed promise, it never achieved the level of dominance that earlier Dodge race cars had enjoyed. The introduction of the downsized Chevrolet Monte Carlo in 1981 made the Magnum obsolete, and by 1979, it was quietly phased out. Today, the Dodge Magnum XE GT remains one of the most overlooked performance cars of the late 70s. It was a car caught between two worlds, too big and luxurious to be a true muscle car, yet too aggressive and powerful to be a traditional Grand Tourer. But for those who appreciate Mopar's last stand before the malaise era took over, by 1973, the muscle car era was starting to wane. Emissions regulations, rising insurance costs, and the looming oil crisis had begun to strangle high-performance vehicles. But Chevrolet wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. Deep within the engineering department, a handful of performance enthusiasts were determined to build a Corvette that was true to its racing roots, one that wasn't just about straight-line speed or schwa, but could also dominate on the track. Enter the 1973 Corvette ZR1, an ultra-rare, no-nonsense performance package designed for those who wanted a road-going racer, not just another boulevard cruiser. Most people think the ZR1 started in the 90s. They don't know about this beast, says one lucky owner, who managed to track down one of the mere 53 units ever built. While the later ZR1 of the early 1990s would become a technological marvel with its advanced LT5 engine, this first iteration of the ZR1 was pure analog aggression, lightweight, loud, and built to be driven hard. At its heart was the LT1, a high-revving 350 cubic inch small block V8 that represented the pinnacle of naturally aspirated Corvette performance at the time. Unlike the brute force big blocks that had defined Corvettes of the late 60s, the LT1 was all about sharp throttle response, a wide power band, and a screaming red line that let it sing past 6,000 RPM, something rare for American V8s of that era. Officially rated at 290 horsepower in 1973, insiders claim it likely made closer to 350 in reality, especially with some minor tuning. With its solid lifter camshaft, forged aluminum pistons, and high-flow heads, the LT1 was a small block with serious racing pedigree, refined over years of development. But the ZR1 wasn't just an engine upgrade, it was an entire performance package designed with track use in mind. Chevrolet engineers threw everything they had at making the ZR1 handle, stop, and endure the brutal conditions of high-speed driving. It came equipped with heavy-duty suspension components, upgraded disc brakes, an aluminum radiator for improved cooling, and a strengthened Muncie M21 4-speed close-ratio manual transmission. It was built for endurance racing, not comfort. In fact, Chevrolet was so committed to the ZR1's purpose as a hardcore performance machine that they stripped away almost every luxury feature that might have softened it. If you ordered a ZR1, you couldn't get power windows, air conditioning, a rear defroster, or even a radio. The philosophy was simple. Anything that didn't contribute to going fast was dead weight. However, 1973 was a year of transition for the Corvette, and the ZR1 found itself caught between two worlds. That year marked the introduction of the new urethane front bumper, replacing the classic chrome units in an effort to comply with new federal crash regulations. It was also the final year before catalytic converters and detuned engines would start to sap the soul out of American performance cars. Unfortunately, it was also a time when many buyers were beginning to prioritize comfort and refinement over raw performance. The result? Chevrolet built only 53 ZR1s in 1973, making it one of the rarest Corvettes of all time. To put that in perspective, even the legendary L88-powered Corvettes of the late 60s saw higher production numbers. Today, the 1973 ZR1 remains one of the most overlooked Corvettes in history. It doesn't have the brute force reputation of the big block monsters from 1967-1971, nor does it carry the exotic technology of the 90s ZR1. But for those who appreciate a raw, naturally aspirated, no-frills driving experience, it stands as one of the purest expressions of Chevrolet's racing nay ever put on the street. Every time I get behind the wheel, it reminds me what a real driver's car feels like, says another owner. It's not about comfort, it's not about luxury. It's about you, the car, and the road. And once that LT1 starts to sing, you remember why Chevrolet built this thing in the first place. The 1975 Bricklin SV1 stands as one of the most intriguing and ambitious experiments in American automotive history. A bold attempt to combine futuristic design, groundbreaking safety features, and muscle car performance. But for all its innovation, the Bricklin SV1 was also one of the most tragic failures in the automotive world. A shining idea trapped in the crossfire of mismanagement, technical issues, and market conditions. People think it's just another 1970s oddity, but it was ahead of its time in many ways, says an enthusiastic Bricklin owner, who also admits that ownership comes with its own set of unique challenges. The gull-wing doors alone set it apart from everything else on the road. And once you get behind the wheel, you realize just how much this car was trying to do. Malcolm Bricklin, an American entrepreneur, was best known for bringing Subaru and Yugo to North America. But in the early 70s, he set his sights on a different target, creating a car that would combine all the drama and excitement of a sports car with the safety features the government and consumer advocates were demanding. His solution? A two-door coupe with a fiberglass body, powered gull-wing doors, and, most notably, a focus on passive safety features that were unheard of at the time. At the core of the Bricklin SV1 was its fiberglass body, which was unique in the way it was manufactured. Unlike most fiberglass cars, the SV1 used acrylic bonded fiberglass, which was more durable and offered better protection against dents and scratches than traditional fiberglass. It was designed to be virtually indestructible and required no paint, giving it an unconventional but eye-catching appearance. Safety was where the Bricklin really stood out. The SV in Bricklin SV1 stood for Safety Vehicle, a nod to its innovative safety features. The car was equipped with an integrated roll cage, designed to provide superior protection in the event of a crash. The front and rear bumpers were engineered to absorb energy during collisions, another attempt to make the car as safe as possible. It also featured a special door design that included a large single piece of acrylic glass that would be structurally sound in a crash. The combination of all these features meant the Bricklin was essentially a rolling testbed for cutting-edge safety ideas. Underneath the fiberglass body, the SV1 was powered by either an AMC 360 V8 or, in later years, a Ford 351 V8, delivering a respectable 175 horsepower. While not an earth-shattering number, the engine provided enough power to make the SV1 a capable performer. Thanks to its lightweight, just over 3,000 pounds, it had a top speed of around 125 mph, which, for its time, was impressive. But the performance was always secondary to the Bricklin's focus on safety and design. However, it was in the engineering of the car where the Bricklin SV1 truly began to falter. The powered gull-wing doors, while visually striking, added significant weight and mechanical complexity. These doors were slow to open and prone to malfunction, which quickly became one of the car's most notorious issues. It was common for owners to experience problems with the doors failing to open, leading to embarrassing situations where people were literally trapped inside their own cars. The complex door mechanism was just one of many issues that plagued the Bricklin. The company's manufacturing process was also a major factor in its eventual collapse. Despite receiving government funding from both the Canadian and New Jersey governments, Bricklin's factory in New Brunswick, Canada, was plagued by production inefficiencies, poor quality control, and a lack of skilled labor. The early cars were rushed out of production with faulty electrical systems, poorly aligned body panels, and numerous other issues. Bricklin had trouble securing consistent parts, and despite his vision, the car lacked the attention to detail needed to make it a true success. By 1976, just a year after its release, Bricklin was forced to cease production. Fewer than 3,000 cars were made, and the company quickly shut down. The Bricklin SV1's short life was largely a result of mismanagement, financial instability, and an inability to compete with established players in the automotive industry. Ironically, its bold attempt at reimagining the sports car had made it too expensive to manufacture while also being too unconventional for mass adoption. Today, the Bricklin SV1 occupies a niche place in automotive history, considered by many as an oddity, an ambitious failure that didn't quite live up to its promise. However, for the select few who own one, it remains a fascinating testament to the era of extreme automotive experimentation. Owning a Bricklin is like owning a piece of automotive history, says another proud owner. It's one of those cars that makes people look twice, even if they don't know what it is. The 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 stands as one of the most unique and underappreciated muscle cars of its era, a rare breed that blends the aggressive performance of a street fighter with the refined elegance of Mercury's Cougar lineup. In the 1960s and 1970s, muscle cars ruled the roads with their powerful engines and bold, attention-grabbing designs. However, while many of these cars were built for sheer performance, few could combine this raw power with the style and comfort that Mercury's Cougar provided. The Cougar, known for its more sophisticated design compared to the Ford Mustang, was often seen as a luxury muscle car that appealed to drivers who sought refinement and performance. But when Mercury unveiled the Cougar Eliminator in 1970, it marked the start of a new chapter for the Cougar line, transforming it into a performance machine that could hold its own against any muscle car on the market. What truly set the Cougar Eliminator apart was its engine option. When equipped with the Boss 302 V8, an engine that was also found in the iconic Ford Mustang, Boss 302, the Cougar Eliminator became something much more than just a stylish luxury muscle car. It became a street fighter, a car capable of high-speed thrills and powerful acceleration. The Boss 302 engine was designed to rev high, and with 290 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque, it provided the Cougar with the raw performance that was needed to keep up with the fastest cars of the time. The car's ability to accelerate from 0 to 60 mph in just around 6 seconds made it an impressive contender on the streets and at the drag strip. The Boss 302 was not just a powerhouse engine, it was built to handle, and the Cougar's platform, while larger and more refined than the Mustang, provided the perfect balance of stability and agility. This made the Eliminator Boss 302 a true driver's car, offering a thrilling experience that combined high performance with a more comfortable and sophisticated ride compared to other muscle cars. However, despite its incredible performance and rare engine option, the 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 never gained the level of recognition it deserved. Ford's Mustang, with its more widespread fame and iconic status, overshadowed the Cougar, leaving it as a hidden gem in the world of muscle cars. The Mustang was the more popular choice thanks to its enduring legacy, and it captured the attention of car enthusiasts and the general public alike. Meanwhile, the Cougar, which was Mercury's luxury muscle car, quietly slid into the background. While the Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 shared its powerful engine with the Mustang, it was often overlooked in favor of its more famous counterpart, even though the Cougar offered a slightly more refined driving experience. The fact that the Eliminator package was only available for 1 year in 1970 further contributed to its obscurity. Out of the 2,000 Cougar Eliminators produced that year, only a fraction were equipped with the Boss 302 V8, making this specific combination even rarer. Today, the 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 is a rare find for collectors, with only a small number of these vehicles still on the road or in private collections. The few owners who have had the privilege of owning one often share stories of how their cars were overshadowed by the more famous Mustang. But with time, they've come to appreciate the Cougar's unique character and performance. The car was a sleeper in its day, designed to deliver an exhilarating driving experience without the widespread attention or hype that its competitors enjoyed. It wasn't until years later that enthusiasts began to recognize the Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 for what it truly was, a rare, high-performance muscle car that blended the best elements of speed, handling, and luxury. For those who seek a muscle car with a hidden history and untapped potential, the 1970 Mercury Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 stands as a testament to the idea that sometimes the greatest cars are the ones that fly under the radar. Its rarity, coupled with its remarkable performance and styling, makes it one of the most exciting cars to drive for those who are fortunate enough to own or experience one today. The Cougar Eliminator Boss 302 might not have received the same recognition as its more famous siblings, but for those in the know, it represents a unique piece of muscle car history, an uncelebrated classic that, in its quiet way, continues to captivate enthusiasts with its powerful presence and unforgettable driving experience. The 1907 Pontiac Can Am is one of those rare and intriguing vehicles that often leaves people scratching their heads, a true blend of luxury and muscle that doesn't quite fit the mold of either. Built off the Pontiac Le Mans platform, the Can Am was Pontiac's bold attempt to take the aggressive power of the Trans Am and merge it with the elegance and sophistication of a luxury coupe. It was a car that confused the expectations of the time. It didn't quite look like a typical muscle car, yet it had the performance chops to rival some of the most revered names in Pontiac's performance lineup. It had the heart of a street fighter, but the body of a luxury cruiser, making it a standout in a world full of conventional muscle cars. Underneath its sleek, more refined exterior, the 1977 Can Am was equipped with a 400 cubic inch V8 engine. While not the most powerful engine in Pontiac's arsenal, producing 200 horsepower, it still offered plenty of muscle for the time. The 400 V8 was more than capable of delivering a satisfying performance for those who weren't necessarily after the raw power of the Trans Am or GTO, but still wanted a car that could get their heart racing. The car's engine had the low-end grunt and mid-range punch that made it a joy to drive, but it was the combination of its refined design and surprisingly potent engine that made it so unique. Unlike its more aggressive muscle car counterparts, the Can Am's design was subtle, an elegant luxury coupe appearance that didn't scream for attention, but quietly commanded respect. One of the signature features of the Can Am that tied it to Pontiac's muscle car legacy was the shaker hood scoop, a part of the car's front-end design that not only looked cool, but also served a functional purpose. This scoop, reminiscent of the ones found on the Trans Am and other high-performance Pontiacs, was a clear nod to the car's power beneath the hood. While the car's exterior may have suggested it was a luxury vehicle, the shaker hood was a clear indicator that this car was ready for action when the moment called for it. Despite this, the Can Am's overall aesthetic was far more refined than other muscle cars of the era, offering a smoother, more luxurious ride, with plush interiors and a well-appointed cabin that made it feel like a higher-end vehicle than just a muscle car. The most interesting aspect of the Can Am, however, is the story behind its limited production. Only 1,377 units of the Pontiac Can Am were ever made before production came to an unexpected halt. The reason for this abrupt end was due to a broken mold for the car's rear end, which made it impossible to continue manufacturing the vehicle. This ended the Can Am's brief run almost as quickly as it began, ensuring that the model remained a rarity in Pontiac's history. The Can Am's relatively short production run only increased its mystique, leaving it as an elusive model in Pontiac's lineup, far less famous than the Trans Am or Firebird, but still a significant part of Pontiac's performance legacy. In the years that followed, the 1977 Pontiac Can Am became a true collector's car, sought after by those in the know for its unique blend of performance and luxury. It confused car enthusiasts at shows and meetups because, to the untrained eye, it seemed to be just another luxury coupe. Its design wasn't as brash or loud as the typical muscle cars of the 1970s, and its performance figures, while respectable, didn't quite measure up to the raw power of the Trans Am. However, once the engine roared to life and the car took off down the road, it became apparent that the Can Am was more than meets the eye. It was a true performance car, despite its more understated appearance. It was a car that could hold its own in terms of speed and handling, but it did so without needing to scream for attention. The Can Am had a quiet confidence that made it stand out even more when people realized what it was capable of. Those who owned the Can Am, and those lucky enough to have driven one, often share the same stories of how it baffled everyone at car shows. People would look at it, unsure of what they were seeing. Its exterior wasn't like the typical muscle car, and its performance numbers weren't as high as some of Pontiac's other legendary models. But once the engine fired up and the car pulled away, it was clear that the Can Am wasn't just another luxury coupe. It was a rare muscle car that managed to combine the best elements of both worlds. The 1977 Pontiac Can Am remains an example of Pontiac's creativity and innovation, a vehicle that mixed the best aspects of luxury and muscle to create something truly unique. Though its production run was brief and its legacy was somewhat overshadowed by more famous models like the Firebird Trans Am, the Can Am remains a collector's dream, rare, stylish, and surprisingly potent. It's a car that defies expectations. The 1972 Chevrolet Vega Cosworth was a groundbreaking car in many ways, representing a bold step forward for American performance vehicles in an era when high-performance sports cars were primarily coming from Europe. While the Vega wasn't fast by today's standards, it was a significant leap in engineering and innovation for Chevrolet and the American automotive industry, showcasing a level of sophistication that was rare at the time. The most striking feature of the Vega Cosworth was its engine, which was developed in collaboration with the British engine specialist Cosworth. Together, they created a high-revving, all-aluminum, fuel-injected engine that was far ahead of its time for an American compact car. The heart of the Vega Cosworth was its 2.0-liter four-cylinder engine, which featured a twin-cam design, an engineering marvel that made it stand out from the vast majority of cars in its class. With its sophisticated fuel injection system and light, all-aluminum construction, the engine was capable of high-revving performance, which was almost unheard of in American cars at the time. The Cosworth Vega produced 110 horsepower, which, while modest by today's performance standards, was plenty of power for the small, lightweight Vega platform. The high-revving nature of the engine made the Cosworth feel nimble and responsive, giving it a race car-like feel that earned it a devoted following among driving enthusiasts. Despite its advanced engineering, the Vega Cosworth faced an uphill battle when it came to attracting buyers. One of the biggest barriers to its success was its price. At nearly twice the cost of a standard Vega, the Cosworth version was positioned as a premium model, making it a rare sight on the roads. With a base price of around $20,600, an amount that was quite substantial for a compact car in 1972, only 3,508 units were produced, making it a rare collectible today. The higher price was partly due to the cost of the sophisticated engine and the extensive hand assembly process required to produce the Cosworth engine. But it also meant that the car was out of reach for many potential buyers who might have otherwise been interested in its performance capabilities. The Vega Cosworth, and hourless rarity, combined with its unique blend of American engineering and European-style performance, made it one of the most advanced American sports cars of the 1970s. The car's lightweight construction and responsive handling made it a joy to drive, with the 110 horsepower engine delivering a lively performance that felt exhilarating at the time. The Vega was also relatively simple compared to other performance cars of the era, offering a more approachable driving experience for enthusiasts who didn't need to spend a fortune on a high-end sports car. However, despite its technical accomplishments, the Vega Cosworth's limited production and premium price tag meant that it didn't reach the mass appeal of more well-known American performance cars like the Mustang or Camaro. As a result, the Cosworth Vega was often overshadowed by these more mainstream models, even though it offered something very different, a more refined, high-revving performance in a compact, sporty package. Today, the 1972 Chevrolet Vega Cosworth is a rare and sought-after classic, admired for its engineering and its place in the history of American performance cars. The car's all-aluminum engine, lightweight design, and fuel injection system were revolutionary for the time, and it remains a standout example of what could have been had Chevrolet continued to pursue this level of performance. It's not fast by modern standards, but back in the early 1970s, the Vega Cosworth felt like a race car, offering a driving experience that was as thrilling as it was unique in the world of American sports cars. The Vega Cosworth may not have achieved widespread popularity during its brief production run, but its rarity and advanced engineering make it a fascinating piece of automotive history, one that stands as a testament to the potential of American-made performance cars during a time of significant change in the industry. The 1974 Jensen Interceptor III is one of those rare and fascinating cars that defies easy categorization. It's a British grand tourer by design, with elegant styling, a handcrafted interior, and the kind of luxury that you'd expect from an Aston Martin or a Jaguar. But underneath that refined exterior, it hides a raw and unapologetic American heart. A massive Chrysler 440 cubic inch V8 that gives it the kind of brute force few European grand tourers could match. The Interceptor III was a unique fusion of European sophistication and American muscle, offering effortless power, a smooth ride, and a road presence that few cars of its era could rival. Jensen, a small British automaker, had always specialized in hand-built, limited production grand tourers, and the Interceptor was their masterpiece. The name itself, Interceptor, suggested speed, power, and aggression, all of which the car delivered in abundance. Unlike its European contemporaries, which typically relied on high-revving, smaller displacement engines, the Interceptor took an entirely different approach by borrowing one of the biggest and most powerful V8 engines available at the time. The Chrysler 440 V8, also found in some of the most legendary Mopar muscle cars, was a powerhouse, delivering a thunderous 280 horsepower and 375 lb-ft of torque in the 1974 Interceptor III. While these numbers were somewhat toned down compared to American muscle cars due to European emissions and fuel regulations, the sheer displacement and torque meant that the Jensen could accelerate with authority, effortlessly pulling its heavy body down the road with a deep, unmistakable V8 rumble. The result was a car that could cruise at high speeds for hours on end, effortlessly overtaking lesser vehicles while surrounding its passengers in an environment of pure luxury. The Interceptor III wasn't just about straight-line performance, though. It handled far better than its weight and power would suggest. The chassis was well-balanced, the suspension was tuned for comfort without being overly soft, and the four-wheel disc brakes provided stopping power that was rare for a car of its size in the early 1970s. This combination of power, handling, and refinement made the Interceptor III one of the best grand tourers of its time, rivaling Aston Martins and Jaguars, while offering a level of reliability that many European exotics simply couldn't match. Despite its impressive performance and luxurious nature, the Jensen Interceptor III remained a niche vehicle, especially in America. While the big block Chrysler V8 made it appealing to American enthusiasts, the car itself remained relatively unknown outside of dedicated collector circles. Unlike the muscle cars that shared its engine, the Interceptor III was never marketed as an outright performance machine. It was designed for speed, but also for comfort and long-distance travel. This made it a car that often flew under the radar, overshadowed by both European sports cars and American muscle machines. However, those who did discover the Interceptor III found themselves captivated by its unique blend of power and prestige. One of the defining characteristics of the Interceptor III was its styling. Designed by Carrozzeria Touring of Italy, the Interceptor had a distinct and timeless shape, with a long hood, a fastback-style rear, and a wide stance that gave it a muscular yet refined look. Perhaps its most iconic design element was the wraparound rear window, which not only enhanced visibility, but also gave the car a unique, unmistakable silhouette. The interior was equally impressive, featuring high-quality materials, plush leather seats, real wood trim, and all the luxury features one would expect from a high-end British grand tourer. Everything about the car exuded craftsmanship and exclusivity, making it feel far more expensive than many of its competitors. The driving experience of the Interceptor III was as special as its design. The massive V8 provided effortless acceleration, and the car had a commanding presence on the road. Unlike many muscle cars of the era, which often felt rougher around the edges, the Jensen combined its brute force with smooth refinement, The ride was comfortable, the cabin was quiet, and the car's power delivery was strong but never overwhelming. It was the kind of machine that encouraged long highway drives at high speeds, effortlessly devouring miles with a level of ease that only the best Grand Tours could offer. Unfortunately, despite its brilliance, the Jensen Interceptor 3 never became a mainstream success. Jensen was a small company with limited production capacity, and the oil crisis of the 1970s made big block V8s less desirable. The company struggled financially, and by the late 1970s, Jensen was on the brink of collapse. As a result, only a small number of Interceptors were ever produced, and even fewer made it to American shores. The 1976 Chevrolet Monza Mirage is one of those cars that seems to exist in a strange, forgotten pocket of automotive history, a car that had all the right ingredients to be a hit, but ended up as a rare and obscure performance machine. At first glance, it looked like a smaller, more aerodynamic Camaro, but in reality, it was something different. The Monza Mirage was a factory-built road racer, borrowing styling cues from IMSA race cars and packing a surprising punch under the hood, making it one of the most unique Chevrolet models of the mid-1970s. The Monza itself was introduced in 1975 as a sporty yet fuel-conscious alternative to the larger Camaros and Chevelles of the time. It was a small, lightweight coupe with sharp lines, a sloping fastback rear, and an aggressive stance that made it stand out from the economy cars it was loosely based on. But Chevrolet knew that the Monza had more potential than just being a stylish commuter car, and in 1976 they introduced the Mirage package, which transformed the Monza into a street-going race car with widened fenders, aggressive ground effects, and a paint scheme that screamed performance. The Mirage package was inspired by the IMSA racing series, where highly modified versions of the Monza were making waves on the track. The factory version came with bold red, white, and blue racing stripes, along with fiberglass body panels that made it look more like a competition machine than a street car. The widened wheel arches, custom front and rear spoilers, and unique body moldings gave the Monza Mirage a low-slung, aggressive presence that made it look like it belonged on the starting grid at Daytona. But the Monza Mirage wasn't just about looks. Under the hood, Chevrolet offered a range of engines, including the highly desirable 305 cubic inch V8. While emissions regulations of the era meant that the power output wasn't earth-shattering, around 140 to 145 horsepower in stock form, the Monza's biggest advantage was its weight. At just over 2,800 pounds, the Mirage was significantly lighter than a Camaro or a Chevelle, making it feel much quicker than its numbers suggested. The low curb weight, combined with the V8's torque in a well-balanced chassis, meant that the Monza Mirage was surprisingly fun to drive. It had a nimble, tossable nature that made it feel more like a European sports car than a traditional American muscle machine, and the wide-body design gave it extra stability in the corners. Despite its promising setup, the Monza Mirage never became a high-volume performance model. It was produced in very limited numbers. Only about 4,097 were built, which meant that even when new, it was a rare sight on the streets. The Mirage was offered as a dealer-installed package through Michigan Automotive Techniques and at MAT, rather than directly from Chevrolet, which likely contributed to its low production numbers. This also meant that not every Monza Mirage was configured the same way. Some had V8s, while others had smaller 4- or 6-cylinder engines, making each car unique in its own way. One of the biggest reasons the Monza Mirage didn't become a bigger success was timing. By the mid-1970s, the muscle car era was fading fast due to rising insurance costs, stricter emissions regulations, and the ongoing fuel crisis. People weren't as eager to buy performance cars, and the Monza Mirage, while undeniably cool, was fighting an uphill battle against an industry that was shifting toward economy and efficiency. The Mirage was also relatively expensive for what it was. Buyers could get a Camaro or even a Corvette for not much more, making it a tough sell for those who wanted real performance. But for those who did buy one, the Monza Mirage offered something truly unique. It was a car that looked fast standing still, a machine that had the presence of a full-blown race car, but was still practical enough to drive every day. It was smaller, lighter, and more agile than most American performance cars of the time, offering a driving experience that was more about finesse than brute force. It may not have had the raw horsepower of the classic muscle cars from the 1960s, but it made up for it with sharp handling, aggressive looks, and a cool factor that made it stand out from anything else on the road. Today, the 1976 Chevrolet Monza Mirage is a rare and underappreciated piece of Chevrolet history. It's one of those cars that only true enthusiasts recognize, a vehicle that has become increasingly collectible due to its low production numbers and unique styling. Finding one in original condition is a challenge, as many were modified over the years or simply disappeared due to their limited recognition. But for those who know what the Monza Mirage represents, it's a forgotten gem, an American road racer with European-inspired agility, a car that mixed muscle car aggression with a lightweight, track-ready design. It's a machine that deserves more recognition. The 1971 Plymouth GTX 446-barrel is one of those rare muscle cars that enthusiasts speak about in hushed, almost reverent tones. It's a car that somehow managed to slip through the cracks of history, despite having all the right ingredients to be remembered as one of the greatest Mopars ever built. By 1971, the GTX name was in its final model year as a standalone performance car, and while many assumed the GTX disappeared entirely, those in the know understood that it went out with a bang. With the legendary 446-barrel V8 under the hood, this was no ordinary muscle car. It was a fire-breathing monster, a machine that could go toe-to-toe with the very best of its era, but remain largely overlooked due to the rising popularity of the Roadrunner and the Challenger. The Plymouth GTX had always been positioned as the gentleman's muscle car, more refined than the bare-bones Roadrunner, but every bit as powerful. It was the car for the driver who wanted both speed and style, a machine that could tear up the quarter mile, but still look sharp doing it. By 1971, however, the muscle car era was beginning to fade. Insurance rates were skyrocketing, emissions regulations were tightening, and the golden age of big block horsepower was coming to an end. The GTX was caught in this transition period, and as a result, it didn't get the attention it deserved. Most buyers flocked to the flashier Roadrunner, which was available with many of the same performance options at a lower price, or the new aggressively styled Challenger, which was stealing the spotlight as Plymouth's go-to muscle machine. This left the GTX in an awkward position. Still an incredible car, but one that was quickly fading into the background. But those who did opt for the 1971 GTX, especially with the 446-barrel package, got one of the most formidable Mopars of the decade. The 446-barrel was an absolute beast of an engine featuring 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors sitting atop the massive 440 cubic inch big block. This setup delivered a factory-rated 385 horsepower and a brutal 490 lb of torque, numbers that were likely underrated, as Plymouth had a habit of being conservative with their power figures to keep insurance companies at bay. In reality, the 6-barrel GTX was easily capable of pushing past 400 horsepower, and with minor tuning, it became a serious street weapon. It was one of the quickest muscle cars of its time, capable of running the quarter mile in the mid-13-second range right out of the box, putting it in the same league as the Hemi-powered cars of the era. Performance wasn't the only thing that set the 1971 GTX apart. The car had undergone a complete redesign for its final year, adopting a more streamlined, aerodynamic shape that set it apart from the boxier Mopars of previous years. The new body featured a long hood, a fastback-style roofline, and aggressive detailing that made it look just as mean as it was. Functional hood scoops, bold striping, and an available air grabber induction system added to the intimidation factor, letting everyone know that this was not a car to be taken lightly. The interior was also a step above the average muscle car, featuring high-back bucket seats, a center console, and an overall fit and finish that made the GTX feel more upscale than its Roadrunner sibling. Despite its power and aggressive styling, the 1971 GTX struggled to find buyers. Plymouth built just 2,942 GTX models that year, and of those, only a small fraction were equipped with the 446-barrel. This makes the 1971 GTX 6-barrel one of the rarest and most desirable Mopars of the muscle car era, a true hidden gem for collectors and enthusiasts. While the Hemi-powered GTX was even rarer, the six-barrel cars were arguably just as fast in real-world conditions, thanks to their massive torque and less finicky carburation setup. One of the biggest reasons why the GTX was overshadowed was that 1971 was the year Plymouth officially repositioned the Roadrunner as the main performance offering in the lineup. While the GTX had previously been the top-tier muscle car, Plymouth decided to make the Roadrunner the focus, offering many of the same performance options but at a lower cost. Buyers who wanted a 446-barrel could get one in a Roadrunner for less money, making the GTX feel redundant to all but the most dedicated Mopar fans. After 1971, the GTX name was retired as a standalone model, though it would later resurface as an option package on high-performance Roadrunners in I-72 and beyond. Today, the 1971 Plymouth GTX 446-barrel is a forgotten legend, a car that never got the attention it deserved, but remains one of the most potent muscle cars of its time. With its combination of brutal power, aggressive styling, and rarity, it has become a highly sought-after collectible, with values steadily rising as more enthusiasts recognize just how special this car really was.